Before we get started, a little bit about me. My name is Rob Ruiz. I am the lead organizer of WP Omaha. We are Omaha's main WordPress meetup group. I've also been a WordPress developer for the past 5 years. So I do everything from build sites with WordPress to develop custom plugins and themes for WordPress, developing custom integrations with WordPress, extending the WordPress REST API to make it available to other web services, and so on and so forth. So basically, I know WordPress inside and out. So if you have any questions after this with anything that has to do with WordPress, please feel free to use the question and answer area in Zoom or the chat. I'll be watching both. And you can look me up on LinkedIn. Again, my name is Rob Ruiz. If you have any questions about anything in WordPress in the future, feel free to reach out, send me a message, and I'm usually pretty responsive. Otherwise, please feel free to check out our meetup group. If you just Google WP Omaha Meetup, it'll come right up. Join our group. It's free to join it, and we send out emails and have meetups, although we have postponed all future meetups for the time being, just because we do have a lack of assistance with organization. So, but yeah, we definitely have a YouTube channel, Facebook page, all those good things. So there's a community there of people if you want to reach out to the community with questions about WordPress or help with WordPress or anything along those lines. Cool. So let's go ahead and get started talking about 10 common WordPress mistakes. The first one is the people that do not understand the difference between using WordPress.com and WordPress as a website framework. So a lot of times what happens here is that they just hear about WordPress and they're like, okay, well, I need to use WordPress. They'll Google WordPress, they'll end up on the link for WordPress.com, and they'll just assume, much like Wix or Squarespace or whatever, that you just go through whatever onboarding path that they have on WordPress.com, and that is like the main way that everybody uses WordPress. This is not true. So WordPress.com is essentially a hosting platform for WordPress sites. So you can spin up a WordPress site on WordPress.com. However, I would say it's probably more common by far that people don't use WordPress.com to host their WordPress site. You can host a WordPress site on any major WordPress hosting or any web hosting platform out there. So the way that works is you buy hosting at GoDaddy or Squarespace, or not Squarespace, I'm sorry, GoDaddy or Bluehost or HostGator or any of the hundreds of website hosts that are available out there, and then they will have WordPress as an option on there. You can one-click install WordPress on their servers and then use WordPress elsewhere, and the experience that you get as an admin of WordPress is a little bit different that way than if you use WordPress.com. So it's important to understand the difference between the two. Just know that WordPress as a framework, you can learn more about it at WordPress.org instead of WordPress.com. It is an open source framework, so that means it can be used anywhere. So basically all this text is telling you is that it's a content management system that can be used anywhere. And so just understand the difference there between WordPress.com and actual WordPress as like a software. Let's move on. Number 2, another big mistake that people make is kind of going crazy with the free stuff. So WordPress is free. That's why a lot of people tend to use it. It is a open source and free software. Meaning you don't have to pay anything to use it. And so what happens is once you start going down the WordPress path, you start finding all sorts of free stuff out there. There's free themes and free plugins, and the software is free. And then people start looking for free hosting, and let me just try and do it all free. And just be careful, okay? Everything comes at a cost. You get what you pay for. And if you try to get away with just going the free route 100%, most times that does not work out well for you. Now, you can get a lot of the ways there for free, which is still great. So I don't want it to sound like WordPress is a bad thing because they're trying to try and trick you into using it for free and it's not free. That's not what I'm talking about here. Basically, what I'm trying to say is if you want to compare the website that you're trying to build versus other leading like professional websites out there on the web, you're going to notice a disconnect between what you can create a WordPress for free and what most people have come to understand as like a professional website experience. There's just not going to be a connection there, and the reason for that is that WordPress starts out when you install WordPress right out of the gate, you want to think of it more as like a clean slate, and then you build on it from there. And so you could build on it with free stuff, you could build on it with paid stuff, and just remember that you get what you pay for. So whenever you look at services and products out there that are available for WordPress, don't just immediately shut them down because they cost money. A lot of times the stuff that costs money is the good stuff. Now, I'm not going to say every time that's the case. There is also stuff out there that is not very popular, not the good stuff that does cost money as well. I would say just do your homework, and just don't get carried away with the free stuff. Look at it a different way and just think, well, I've gotten a lot for free. That's lowered the cost of me building a website quite a bit. So if you end up spending, $50, $100, $150 on plugins or themes or whatever on your website, that's still a website, if you build it yourself, that only costs you $150 as opposed to what I would consider today's standard, which is anywhere between $3,000 and $5,000. So it's still a dramatic benefit. Let's talk a little bit about WordPress extensions. So WordPress extensions come in two forms: plugins and themes. I guess technically by today's standards, it's probably three actually, because blocks are kind of considered like a new thing that's been added to WordPress, and you can go into the block directory and install blocks. But under the hood, blocks for the WordPress editor are actually just plugins that only contain the block. So you can boil it all down to just two things: plugins and themes. So the lesson to learn here, and I'm not going to read these slides verbatim here because that's kind of a waste. I can provide a link to these slides later if you want. You can go read them yourself. But I'll just expand a little bit upon this off my own knowledge here. The idea here, kind of what we're trying to point out with these images, is that if you get too carried away with just installing one-off little plugins for like every tiny little feature that you want on your website, you can end up kind of being this guy on the bottom right here with this car that's just got, it kind of looks ridiculous. He's gone and found a whole bunch of little accessories and, kind of strapped them all onto his car, and it's just kind of like accessory overload on his car. Yes, his car is very customized, but it's not really customized in what I would consider to be a very clean and cohesive way, where you've got this customized car on the left that has been done in what I would consider to be a much more professional and clean looking way. And so when you're adding custom features and customizations to WordPress, you just want to make sure that you think ahead a little bit in terms of like what all the features that you're going to need on your website is, and do a lot of research before you just start willy-nilly going into the plugin directory and starting to just add all sorts of random plugins to your WordPress site. That's not typically a good direction to go, because that's how you end up like this guy down here. You end up with 20, 30, 40, 50 plugins installed on your WordPress site, all kind of doing one tiny little thing, where you could have, if you had spent more time researching, found a plugin out there. You could have replaced 5 of those plugins with one other plugin that does all 5 of those things. And then also, a lot of people will like deactivate plugins when a plugin doesn't work the way they want it to and just leave it installed and deactivated instead of deleting it all together. This all can cause many problems down the line. A list of these problems would be like security vulnerabilities, out of date code, non-updated plugins, obviously performance can be an issue here. The more plugins you have on your website, the higher the likelihood is that some of those plugins are going to end up slowing down your website or causing problems for your website in some way, shape, or form. So we want to make sure that the list of plugins that you have installed on your website is pared down as much as possible, is as clean as possible. You just want to keep that number of plugins installed as low as possible, while still getting as many features in there as possible. So I'm not trying to say like don't install plugins. Plugins are definitely necessary. I'm just saying be very picky, choosy about which plugins you install, and don't think for a second that adding a plugin and then kind of forgetting that you added it and not really like utilizing it that well or whatever. Don't think that that doesn't come with a price. It does come with a price. And if you're not careful about which plugins or themes you're using or whatever, if any of that gets out of date and you don't pay attention to it for a while, next thing you know, your WordPress site's getting hacked and you're thinking, oh, somebody knows my username and password or whatever. Well, maybe not. Maybe there was a security vulnerability that WordPress patched and the plugins patched, and the plugin never got updated or WordPress never got updated. And then somebody, because they publish these exploits, somebody writes a bot that goes out there and combs through websites all over the internet and checks for ones that are built on WordPress, and then attempts to attack your website through that known exploit. And an X amount percentage of the time, they're going to get through and exploit some websites and hack some websites. So if you don't want to be that person, just make sure you're very careful about what plugins and themes you use. And I'm going to touch on the security side of that a little bit more in a little while. Cool. So your site's theme, you want to make sure you choose your site's theme wisely. A lot of times when people are just getting a WordPress site up and going, they don't really care that much about which theme they're going to use. They'll just find whatever they think looks good at first, and then they'll start building on top of that, not realizing that later, if they decide, okay, I don't like this theme that much anymore, I found a better one, I want to switch it out. What you'll find is that if you do that later down the road, you're more likely to cause yourself problems than if you had just found the perfect theme right out of the gate. So I highly suggest anybody, even before you start building a WordPress site, figure out which theme you want to use for your WordPress site right out of the gate. Like, you don't have to do it right before you spin up the WordPress site. You could do it after you spin up the WordPress site, but you definitely want to make sure you do it right towards the beginning of the process of building the whole site. Now, I'm not saying don't ever change your theme or whatever, but just know that changing your theme does come with some work. There are likelihoods that something will not, one plugin won't agree with your theme very well, or that things will just won't, you'll notice things that don't work perfectly in your site after you've changed themes. And so then you have to go through it and troubleshoot those things. In some cases, depending on your website and what you're using in terms of plugins and all that, in some situations, there's nothing wrong and you're good to go when you switch themes and everything works fine. I would say that's the minority of the situation, though. Most times, in the majority of situations, you've got at least one thing that needs to be fixed. Sometimes you can have 20, 30, 40 things that need to be fixed. It just depends on the complexity of your website, the complexity of the theme you were using before, the complexity of the plugins that you're using, how much customization has been done to this website. There's just so many factors that go into it. So just make sure you look at all your options, and also don't just choose from the free themes that are in the WordPress theme directory. That's not always the best way to go. There are places you can go to find paid themes as well. And so I would highly recommend you go and search through theme marketplaces out there that provide themes that actually cost money. And then those will sometimes provide you a bunch of functionality that you need built right into the theme. especially if it's functionality that's common for the type of website that you're building. For instance, the first thing that comes off the top of my head is like a restaurant. There's a ton of restaurant themes out there, and something that's common that a restaurant will need on their website is a menu. You want a digital version of your menu that people can go and browse on the website so that people know what you serve at your restaurant. Well, if you don't think to look for a restaurant theme first, then you'll end up having to look for something that gives you that menu functionality in the form of a plugin instead of a theme later on after the fact. Where if you had just gone and looked for restaurant themes right out of the gate, you would have found a bunch of themes that already have the capability for you to have menu items and stuff added right out of the gate, and without having to install any other plugins. That functionality came right in, comes right in those themes. So, but those themes that have that kind of custom functionality like that usually cost money. So go out there and look for that kind of stuff. And just because a theme costs 30, 40, 50, $60, I wouldn't say that, oh, well, don't go for that theme because free is better than not free. I would say, look at what you get with that theme. And if that theme is going to save you a bunch of time and effort, in terms of like having to program custom functionality, or having to install a bunch of other plugins that maybe will get you what you want, but who knows? I would say that's easily worth $50 or $60 to just get kind of like a nice, good starting point from a theme. Because I charge more than I charge more per hour than what these themes cost. So if it's going to take longer than an hour to get to the point where the theme gets you, then that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to not choose the paid theme. So we'll go ahead and go on to number 5, customizing your theme. So this is and just kind of like a heads up here. What you're going to notice as we go through some of these slides is that the farther in the higher in the numbers that we get on these slides, for the most part, the more it's going to have to do with when you do WordPress development as opposed to just building a WordPress site like a simple way. There's a lot of different ways you can use WordPress. Somebody like me, who's a web developer, can do a lot more with WordPress than people who are not web developers. And so what happens is that you end up, there's a big difference between somebody who's like new to web development and somebody who's extremely experienced like I am with web development. And so you've got a whole spectrum in between. And so you might have somebody who's kind of like in the middle of that spectrum that knows a little bit about web development, but not a whole lot, but they know just enough to get themselves in trouble. And so what they'll do is say, oh, okay, well, I've got this theme, I've got WordPress, I've got my plugins. I need to customize something in here. I know that I can add custom CSS or custom PHP or custom HTML in these different ways and different places. So let me just go ahead and try to tweak the theme a little bit to make it fit my needs. Most themes will only get you a certain percentage of the way there. And so very often you'll have to kind of fill that 5, 10, 50% gap where the theme didn't meet your needs all the way with a little bit of customization. This is very common in WordPress. I would say more often than not, actually. And so basically what the slide is pointing out is that it's common to customize WordPress themes, but there's really only one way to do it, one right way to do it. And that right way is with child themes. So what you don't want to do is you don't want to go into the theme's core files and start changing the code. Because what'll happen is you'll make your changes to the code and you'll upload them to the server. You'll refresh your page. You'll see all the stuff that you expect to see on the page, and you'll say, okay, cool, I did it. What I did worked, and I got the result that I wanted. That must mean that I did it right. If the way that you got there is by editing the theme's core files, you didn't do it right. You actually did it wrong, because what's going to happen is if that theme ever pushes an update and you update that theme, all the changes that you made to that code are going to get blown away, And if you don't have any backups, there's no way of getting it back. So that's why we use child themes. Child themes override parent themes, and that's the correct way to customize your theme, through the use of a child theme, not editing the theme's core files. So custom functionality. It's not that hard, and don't be scared of it. Don't be afraid of having to add custom functionality, or don't get frustrated when your site is like 90 to 95% perfect, and you feel like, oh well, there's one main feature that I really have to have on my site. I can't get it with the theme that I want. Now I have to start over and look for a whole new theme. A lot of times that's not the case. Sometimes you don't need another theme. Sometimes you don't need another plugin. Sometimes all you need is a little bit of custom code to tweak how stuff works, and then or you could create your own plugin that has that code and implement it, and you're good. Now, you might think to yourself like, oh, well, I'm not a programmer, so I shouldn't be doing stuff like that. I would go ahead and just say, if you are extremely inexperienced with the web, like if you don't know HTML even, then you might be right. However, if you know at least enough, like if you know a little bit of HTML, if you know a little bit of CSS, if you took some web, if you know a little bit about software, or if you know a little bit about how the web works, I would say go ahead and stretch, using WordPress is a great way to stretch your capabilities when it comes to those things. Learn some HTML, learn some CSS, try it out on your site. WordPress is a great platform to go ahead and noodle around with web development. So don't be afraid to do those things. It's not that hard to create a custom plugin. It's not that hard to create a custom theme. It's not that hard to customize things in a theme or a plugin if you just learn how to do it the right way. And there's lots of resources out there to learn how to do it the right way. A lot of times you'd be surprised how, somebody comes to me with a problem that they think is going to take 10, 15, 20 hours. I can knock it out in like 30 minutes because I can think of like a very clean and concise way of accomplishing the goal and adding that feature with very minimal amount of code. And I add it and we're good. So be open-minded in that regard, and don't always think about, can I just add some custom functionality to get this? Now, depending on how complex that custom functionality is, maybe it's not the best idea that you just try and do it. It all depends on what we're talking about. Also, let's discuss the difference between themes and plugins and what the responsibilities are and where you need to add what. The role of a theme is to control the look and feel of a site, and the role of a plugin is to add functionality and features to a site. So sometimes there are overlap there. Sometimes themes add functionality to your site. Sometimes plugins can add visual features to your website. But for the most part, they should be kept very separate. So not understanding how all that works can be a huge mistake that people make, because they might go and abandon the whole project because, hey, it's not doing what I want, I give up, or whatever. That is obviously a mistake as well. Hooks. We're not going to get too much into hooks. I know it says what are hooks here. Let's just say this much. Hooks are the key to extending WordPress and WordPress plugins, and in some cases WordPress themes. So make sure you learn about what hooks are. That's a bit beyond the scope of what we're talking about right now, so I'm not going to go into depth about how hooks work and what actions and filters are and all this stuff. But just learn a little bit how they work, because once you kind of understand that concept, it'll make it easier for you to understand what is possible and what's easy to manipulate and what's not easy to manipulate. All right, let's talk a little bit about security. Another big mistake people make is that they assume that WordPress by default is insecure. They'll go read a blog article and say like, oh, you know, so many WordPress sites get hacked, but Joomla websites don't get hacked as much, or Drupal websites don't get hacked as much, or Squarespace or Wix sites don't get hacked as much, yada, yada, yada. And so they'll be like, oh, well, WordPress is not a great solution then. Well, that would be false. WordPress is a great solution. The reason why WordPress is easy to hack is because almost 40% of the internet runs on WordPress. I'll let that number sink in for a second. 40%. So that means of all the times that you've browsed the internet, 40% of the time that you're on the internet, you're on WordPress, whether you know it or not. So the reason why that's a security problem is that means that people that want to make automated bots that go out there and hack websites, if they just target WordPress sites specifically, they can easily get 40% of the internet out there. So, well, not easily. They can easily write programs around 40% of the internet. That doesn't mean that 40% of the time they're going to succeed in hacking. That just means that the bot that they use will work in its programming of being able to like say, hey, try going to this page, try filling out the username and password form, try going after this exploit, try going after that exploit, right? There's places you can go all over the internet that like show all kinds of well-known WordPress exploits. Even though they've been patched, there's still, if you don't update your WordPress site, the vulnerability might still be there. So that's, again, another reason why it's important to keep things up to date. So so you want to make sure that you're doing all the necessary things to make it difficult and for people to hack your website. And those things are keeping plugins up to date, keeping themes up to date, keeping WordPress up to date. Use a very secure username and password. There's security plugins you can install security plugins that make it, that like essentially limit the amount of times the same person can fill out your login form, or restrict certain IP addresses by country. If you just like say, hey, nobody from Russia or China or Indonesia or Japan should be going to my website ever. So if I'm getting a bunch of hits from people from IP addresses that belong to those countries, chances are those are not real people actually trying to go to your website to whatever, to like use your website for the purpose that you built it. Those are not people. Usually those are bots. Those are programs that are attempting to poke and prod at your website to see how easy it is to poke a hole in it and breach the security and get in and just be destructive. Usually just put spam advertisements all over it, or put random text, obscene text all over it, so on and so forth. So WordPress is not easy to hack. And then you might be wondering, okay, well, how come they don't just make it more secure right out of the gate? Why do I have to install plugins to add these layers of security? Well, the main reason why you need to do it that way is because if they added that functionality into core WordPress, that means 100% of that 40% of the internet would all have the exact same security protocol. That kind of defeats the point. That means that the programmers the bad programmers out there that are writing these security, these hacker bots, they can just figure out what that security protocol is and code right around it. So that's obviously not very useful. So a smarter way to go about things, and that's why WordPress does things this way, is that they leave the security up to extensions and plugins so that the programmers that are writing these hacker bots are less likely to predict exactly which WordPress sites are using which security plugins. This adds more variables into the equation and makes it way more complicated for an automated process or a program to hack its way into a WordPress site. All right, Number 9. So a lot of people assume that like WordPress is just going to make a website like any other website they go to, and so by today's state, what people would consider to be a slow or fast site has changed over the years. 10, 15 years ago, websites were much slower than they are today. And so a lot of people, they'll start using WordPress, and right out of the gate, they'll be surprised by the fact that WordPress is not that fast. They'll be like, well, why is my website so slow? Why is WordPress so slow? WordPress sucks. I want something better. Well, the reason why WordPress isn't that fast is because it's dynamically hitting a database and pulling stuff from the database and building the web page upon request. Out of the gate, that's what it does. Now, you can add a whole host of other functionality to WordPress to make that whole process faster, and you should. So things you want to think about are what host or server is your WordPress site running on? If it's not a host or server that's designed for WordPress, chances are it might not be fine-tuned for WordPress, thus not giving you the optimal speed for a out-of-the-gate WordPress install. Okay, so that's one thing to think about. Also, your database. This is more for websites that have been around a long time and have more data in them. But if your database is not clean, if it's full of a whole bunch of junk, that's going to slow down the whole website. So be careful how much data you store in a WordPress database, because the more data you have in there, the harder the computer has to work in order to run MySQL, which is the database that powers WordPress. And if it's too intense, if it's eating up too much RAM, then that will slow down everything. So you want to make sure you keep your database optimized and clean, and don't install plugins that add too many posts, or a bunch of automatic stuff gets populated into WordPress and muddies up the database. That will slow things down. Also, cache is king. So I'm not talking about dollars and cents. I'm talking about a WordPress cache, like your web cache. There's two types of caches. There's a front-end cache, where your browser actually caches things on your local device, whether it be on your phone or computer or whatever. That's kind of a front-end cache. But then there's also server-side caching that happens for a lot of WordPress sites too. You want to make sure that you're leveraging both if you want your site to be as fast as possible. So that's just one more mistake that people make, is they don't think about performance. They don't try to optimize performance. They don't think about where is the fastest place to host my WordPress site from. They don't think about how much traffic their WordPress site is going to get ahead of time. And so you just want to make sure that you optimize all of these things and plan accordingly. If you have giant images on your homepage, the big images are a very common problem. People don't realize, somebody might go take a picture with their phone or whatever. They've got some fancy, nice phone like this, and that phone takes, 50 megapixel pictures or whatever. Well, the more megapixels, the better the picture comes out for sure, but it also makes the file size larger. So if you just upload a giant file, a giant image to your site, and you put it on your homepage, it's going to take a long time to render that homepage. And so that slows down the whole load time of your page. And then that affects a bunch of stuff, just so everybody knows. Like, it's not just like, oh, I want it to be fast because I want to be able to use the website better. You're talking about problems with SEO, Google. You're talking about sometimes on mobile, if people are on 3G connections, your page never loading at all. So therefore, your website for that user was completely not working for them, which is a huge problem. So just keep in mind, like, there's a lot of reasons why you want to make sure you optimize your performance for your website, especially when it comes to WordPress sites that get a lot of traffic. All right, and the last point we're going to go over is don't be so destructive. A lot of people will make the mistake of when they edit things or change things, there's no way to go back to what it was before. So first of all, if something is not broken, don't fix it. Keep things, once you get your site working the way you want it to work, try not to touch things as much as possible. And if there are things that need to be touched frequently, make sure you put that through like a test. Make sure you test that. Make sure you can go do those things without problems occurring. You want to make things as light touch as possible with WordPress. That's the whole point of using a content management system, is so that you can update things rapidly and change things without things breaking. But you want to make sure that those changes there's a way to revert the change. For instance, if you're going to go switch your theme on your WordPress site from one theme that you've been using for the last 2 or 3 years to a new theme that you think is better, you might want to use what's called a staging environment to essentially create a duplicate of your WordPress site and then change the theme on that duplicate site first, so that your live site is unaffected. That way, anything that breaks, it only breaks on the staging site where nobody's going, where none of your traffic is going to. That way you can work out all the kinks that might occur from that transition and get that all working and solve those problems on the staging site first. Then once you have the staging site all working and functioning the way that you want it to, you move it over to your live site, and then you're good and you have no downtime. Also, a lot of hosting environments will have the option for automatic backups. Definitely encourage people to use those backups. Very, very, very often, people will not leverage the backup system and they will change things on their site. Things will break. They don't know what they changed because they can't remember what they changed because they changed a bunch of stuff. And now their website's not working and they don't know what to do about it. Well, if they had had an automatic backup system, they could have just loaded the backup from 2 or 3 days ago before they made all those changes. Then everything would go back to the way it was before and your site's working again. If you don't do that, you've basically destroyed your site, and you're going to have to hire somebody expensive like me to come and try and troubleshoot it and fix it for you. Or spend a bunch of time on it yourself and waste days or weeks trying to fix something. That's never a good situation. Make sure you have revisions turned on so that when you edit content on your website, if you go and look at it later and notice that's, your change to the website caused something to go away and you don't know why, you can go reload one of those revisions. WordPress has a revision system built into the page and post editing, and a lot of people don't know that. So you can go in there and look through your revisions and say, oh, I edited this post or whatever on, yesterday, and that what I changed messed stuff up. Let me just go load the revision before that, just put that back live, and you're good to go. Try again. to try to edit the page the right way this time or something. You know what I mean? So just don't be destructive with your site. Make sure that you're doing things in a non-destructive way. Make sure you're building on top or on the side of what you currently have, instead of just like editing straight on the live website or whatever. Cool. And that is the end of the top 10 mistakes for WordPress. I tried to go through them as fast as possible and make up for our lost time earlier in this session. I always like to leave a solid 10 to 15 minutes at the end of the session for questions. So now is a good time to ask questions if you have any. Sharon is asking, do you use Divi? I definitely know what Divi is. It's a page builder. Do I use it? The answer is no. I personally do not use Divi. I personally do not like Divi very much, and I'll tell you the reason why. Now, before I tell you why, just know that I have gone to websites that were built in Divi that look great and behave great. So I'm not going to say that it's impossible to build a good website with Divi. That's not true. You can build a good website with Divi. So if Divi is your preferred page builder, I've got nothing against that. I personally don't choose to use Divi because I don't like the idea of combining the concerns of your page editing experience with your theme. I don't think that those two need to be the same thing. I would prefer that my page builder is a plugin, not a theme, so that way I can always later change my theme if I want and not have to worry about my page builder being gone. I just do not like the idea of combining those two ideas together. I'd like those to be mutually exclusive, so that I can have a page builder as a plugin that works with any theme. So an example of a page builder that works with any theme is like Elementor, WP Bakery, which is also known as Visual Composer. What's another good one? Beaver Builder. There's a lot out there. A lot of page builders out there. So if I'm going to use a page builder, and honestly, we have Gutenberg now. I urge people these days, try to get away with not using a page builder these days. Gutenberg is actually really good. There's a lot of good stuff out there for Gutenberg. It's not the best thing in the world, and it's definitely not at a point where it can be considered a viable replacement for a full-featured page builder. But you'd be surprised how far you could get with it these days. A lot of times people just go with a page builder because they just assume they need one. Yeah, I personally I think that people can get a lot more uh, from Gutenberg today than they were able to get with the classic editor. And I just think if you're not trying to use Gutenberg as your main page builder, you're probably never going to know what you can get away with while using it and what's available out there. And so I just say try and go that route first. And then if that doesn't get you where you want to be, then go ahead and use a page builder. But again, I would urge people to try to use page builders that keep the theme of your WordPress site separate from the page builder functionality. Because once you start intermingling the concerns, then things get wonky and you end up stuck, and you don't want to be stuck down a path. But good question. Good question. Divi's okay. Like I said, I've seen people use it with success. A lot of people like it because it's got a really good front end editing experience. So what I mean by that is you can have there's a back end editing experience and a front end editing experience. So what that means is that the back end editing experience means that you have to be in the WordPress admin to edit and change and control how your pages look and feel. The thing that a lot of people like about Divi is that it has a really good front end editor. A lot of people like to see their website the way that their visitors see their website when they're looking at the page, and they want to be able to like edit the way that that whole page looks while they're looking at it the way that users look at the page. And so that's a front end editing experience. And so basically what it does is it just adds a whole bunch of like little editing boxes all over the page and allows you to click and drag and move and change things and see the changes real time and stuff. That's cool. If that's the only way that you know how to work, then I've got no qualms with that. Do what works for you. But I would say try some other page builders out, because there are other page builders that actually most page builders besides Gutenberg have a front end editing experience that is at least as good as Divi, if not better. So try some of those other page builders out. I personally just don't believe in the future of Divi. It just doesn't make any sense to combine those concerns. Any other questions about anything related to WordPress at all? Any plugins, any themes, performance, security, styling, editing, styling, anything. I get a lot of questions about hosting a lot, like what are the better hosts, which hosting providers to avoid when it comes to WordPress, which ones are good to go to. You have any questions about that? We could talk about that. Anything at all. Sharon, you got another one. Good. Thank you very much. Keep the questions going. I encourage the questions. So please think of questions because now's a good time to ask them. I find it hard to tell a developer what I want until I see it. I don't know what I want. That can rack up a lot of time. Like I like this, I don't like that. How to cut through the indecision? Wow. That's an extremely good question, Sharon. That's a great question. That's probably one of the better questions I've ever been asked. How to cut through the indecision? Okay, so there's a few different ways to do this. I'll start with the ways that I don't like the most, and then we'll get to the other ways. A very common way to get through the indecision is just simply through mockups or wireframing or even like Photoshop templates or whatever. You can like kind of do your web design before you apply it to the WordPress site itself. Going through it that way could definitely cut down on cost for sure, because it's most usually, especially if you have any kind of design chops yourself, you can do some of that design ahead of time and kind of figure out how you want things to be right out of the gate and experiment with things a little bit visually before you go to a developer and say, okay, this is what I want built. The reason why I don't like that approach is because I feel like with WordPress, it's so quick and easy to change stuff in WordPress that spending too much time designing stuff can be a problem for a couple of reasons. One, and it can actually be more expensive than doing it real time, because now you're having to pay a designer and a developer instead of just the developer. And two, a lot of times what will happen is that you'll find a solution out there that gets you a long ways, but sometimes you'll have to design around that solution because it saves you so much time. And so that might throw your previous designs kind of out the window. So that's why I don't like that approach, because people will design a bunch of crazy stuff and say, oh, I want this thing to look like that and like this. And when they click on this, I want it to open up in this type of an animation or whatever, right? And they don't realize that when they're doing all that, there's nothing out there that is going to do everything exactly the way that you just imagined. So now you're forced into a situation where you have to hire somebody like me that can make anything possible. Anything you could possibly imagine, like I can make it happen, but I'm expensive. And I can only do that because I know a lot about web development. So sometimes it's easier to just like kind of see what solutions are already out there first, like I was saying with the themes earlier, or with certain plugins. Like do a lot of research about what is already pre-built out there and ready to go right out of the box exactly the way you want that. Use those things as like kind of cornerstones to your website and design around those big time-saving cornerstones so that you don't have to reinvent the wheel later after you've got everything built. So for instance, like if you're going to build an e-commerce site, build your e-commerce site around WooCommerce, which is the main e-commerce plugin out there. Don't just design it however you can like think up in your mind. Look at WooCommerce, look at what it does right out of the gate, and then figure out what you want customized from where their starting point is. That's how I like to go about doing things. And a lot of times what you'll find is that if you're not very decisive on how you want things on your site, what you'll find is that a lot of these plugins and themes that are out there, they've already made a lot of these decisions. And you're probably going to find that, like, I don't know, 7 or 8 times out of 10, you're going to be okay with the decisions that they made, as opposed to some decisions that you made that might not have been as educated as the ones that those people made. So you might like find a theme that you like and see how they're doing things a certain way and think to yourself like, well, why is this theme putting their mobile menu, their the main menu when it's on mobile, why are they putting it there instead of doing it this other way that I like? And that might cause you to do some research and be like, oh, well, I wonder what the benefits are between the way I want to do it and the way they're doing it. You might find that the reason they did it that way is actually a really good reason, and that the way you wanted it actually isn't a great idea because of a bunch of factors that you never even thought of. Like, you never thought of accessibility. Well, what if somebody who is visually impaired or hearing impaired or whatever, and somebody who's impaired in some way, what if they try to go to your website and they try to use that style of navigation? It might not be very easy for them to do it that way, where these other people already considered that problem and were like, hey, it's okay, we've got you taken care of. Our mobile menu is completely accessible so that anybody who's visually impaired or whatever can use your website if they visit it. Boom, problem solved. Now you don't have to worry about that decision and you're good to go. So just try to like, again, think ahead, like plan out everything ahead of time. What if I combine this theme with this set of plugins in WordPress? Where is that going to leave me? Try to get the functionality in there first, then get the visual aspects in there around those big pieces of functionality. That's going to save you a lot of time. It's going to save you a lot of decision making, and you'll end up with something that you're still going to like. And again, this all depends on complexity. If your website is some big complex thing that's like, some grandiose concept that I can't even imagine right now, if it's complex, there may not be any getting around having to build a whole bunch of custom stuff and having to do some expensive development. The solution just may not exist. However, if your site isn't trying to, reinvent the wheel in any way, shape, or form, and it's relatively simple, I think you'd be really surprised what you can find out there for WordPress. It's been around for 15 years, and you can find themes out there that do a whole bunch of crazy stuff and look really, really, really cool right out of the box. So try to let some of the community do the work for you. That's probably the best thing about WordPress, in my opinion. And I've said this for many years. The greatest advantage of using WordPress is the number of people that use it. The more people that use an open source framework, the more people you have contributing to the ecosystem around that thing. And so now you've got hundreds of thousands of plugins, tens of thousands of themes to choose from, all sorts, so much stuff to consider, so much stuff to throw into WordPress. You've got a gazillion options, and they're all really well developed. They've been put through the ringer. You've got a lot of people using them and working out finding all the bugs and finding all the kinks in those things ahead of time before you've even gotten to them. And so those developers have already, solved all these little problems that would probably end up existing in something that's not been thoroughly tested as much or whatever. But that's a fantastic question, Sharon. Thank you so much for asking that, because that is a problem that most people do encounter. How to join the open WordPress user group. So I can illustrate that real quick. You can go to www.meetup.com/WP-Omaha. If you don't have a meetup.com account, whoa, that's interesting. That's the first time that's ever happened. What? Well, this is fun. Where is WP Omaha? Did they change our URL up on us, or is this a bug with Meetup just right now? That would be extremely surprising. Oh, look at that. This is interesting. I don't know if there's problems going on with meetup.com or what right now. Okay. Well, let's go to this other option. You can go to wpomaha.org, which is our official website. And if you use Slack, our community communicates through Slack. If you don't know what Slack is, look it up. It's like a communication app that's commonly used in small businesses. You can join our Slack community by going under Contact Us and go to Join the Slack community. Fill out this form. It'll send me an email. I will end up taking the email address that you put in this field right here, and I will send you an invite to our Slack workspace. Then all you have to do is install the Slack app or go to Slack's website and log in to our workspace with your login credentials. And we have a very, well, it used to be vibrant Slack workspace, and you can go in there and communicate with people. Also, we do have a Facebook page. So if you go to facebook.com/ I don't know, I think I'll have to just go to my actual page here and then just look for WP Omaha. Yeah, so facebook.com/groups/WP Omaha. We do have a Facebook group. We do also have a Twitter. We got a lot of things, and you can find your way to all those here. The Twitter, Facebook. We also have a YouTube channel as well. And here you can find a bunch of recordings of previous meetups. I'm very surprised about the whole meetup.com thing right now. I don't know why. I don't know what's going on with Meetup. I've never seen this happen before, and I've spent quite a bit of time on this website. So I don't know what's going on with that. I'll have to find out. But usually you can just go to meetup.com. And if you just Google WP Omaha, Meetup is usually the thing that comes up first. See, meetup.com/WP Omaha. Again, I'm very surprised. I don't know what's going on here with this, but wow. Anyway, so that's how you go about it. Also, feel free to email me anytime. Look me up on LinkedIn, linkedin.com/in/Rob C. Ruiz. Or you can just search for me, Rob Ruiz. This is my profile. Send me a message. That should work out. Wow, this is crazy. There must be something weird going on with meetup.com. That's crazy. Yeah. So reach out, and that's the best way to get locked into that. We have not been having a lot of meetups lately. That is because I personally have decided to back away as the leader of WP Omaha, and so nobody else has really stepped up to fill that void, unfortunately. I'm moving on to contributing my time in other places. Some of that is with DoSpace. I'm also starting to contribute to some open source WordPress related projects. Instead of focusing locally on just Omaha, I'm going to start contributing to stuff that's a little bit more global. Cool. Well, we're about 9 minutes over. I think that mostly covers the time that we missed at the beginning. If there's no other questions, we'll go ahead and wrap up this session. Thank you for attending this session. Again, my name is Rob Ruiz. Again, apologies for the rough start there. And we hope to see you at a future webinar. Also, if you're not aware of the code community through DoSpace, right now, DoSpace's code community focus is WordPress. So I will show that real quick. If you go to DoSpace code community, you will find the page that talks about kind of the schedule, the cycles. And you'll see right now in September 15th through December 1st, right now we're in a WordPress cycle. And you can look at the lesson plan here. And here's our lesson plan for this code community. I believe we are on lesson 4 now. So we'll actually be talking about the admin side and security and all this stuff. And then once we get to about the 5th one, I think, I will be attending every single one of those. I was not able to attend the one earlier this week. But yeah, just so you know, and this is free, so you can attend the DoSpace code community. I think you just have to sign up for it so that you can join the Zoom and all of that. But yeah, if you want to learn a lot more about WordPress, even down to the coding aspect of it, you can utilize the code community right now through December 1st. It's all WordPress. Cool. All right. Well, thanks everybody. If there's no other questions, we'll go ahead and conclude tonight's meeting. Thank you for attending and have a good night.